Five.
Survivor specialist Phil and Alexa are back with the first real off-season podcast of this season of this off-season. Survivor Guatemala Rewatch. This is going to be interesting. I'm really curious to see, one, how the fans react. Two, how we remember doing 3 episodes now and not watching them immediately before we podcast. And then 3, I'm just really really curious to see if people's opinions on Guatemala change as we do this. I know you and I both had it very low in our rankings when we did our season rankings. Will was telling us we were idiots, which is something Will loved to do, but he was still doing it a lot with Guatemala. And after these first 3 episodes, I think I remember why I had it so low, but my gosh, these first 3 episodes are so much fun.
So I don't know about you, Phil, but I had to watch all 3 of those episodes last night because, like you said, if I'd watched them Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I wouldn't know what we were talking about tonight. I'd know we were talking about Guatemala, but past that, I'm not really sure. But man, these first 3 episodes were awesome. And I mean, we'll get into it as the season progresses, but I'm looking forward to looking back on this podcast 3 weeks from now and wondering if I'm shooting myself in the foot thinking, man, Guatemala was a top season. How does no one talk about this? Why has no one returned from Guatemala? Or I'll say, wait a minute, it went downhill so fast. I'm curious. I don't know, but I loved these first 3 episodes. They were really fun and such a different flavor of Survivor than what we just finished watching. So It's really been a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and maybe it's because of what we just watched. I'm just looking at our season rankings real quick. I had Guatemala at 25. This was after the addition of Korong. You had Guatemala at 26. So we both had Guatemala very low coming into this. I do remember why I have it a little bit lower later on. And I don't want to talk about too much. I want to talk about these first 3 episodes mainly. But these first 3 episodes are way better than I remember. And I don't know if it's just because of how – it's been a long time since I rewatched Guatemala, probably pre-Blood versus Water, which is a long time in terms of Survivor. Survivor's changed a lot since then. And maybe that's why, this is just such, a breath of fresh air, like you were saying. It's, coming out of nowhere. It's whoa, we have challenges that don't end in puzzles. Oh, my goodness.
And fun challenges. That, I mean, we'll get to it, but that Spider-Man challenge was crazy fun. That Tug of War challenge could have been cool, even though it was just, you're standing there the whole time. But still, that's, that's survival. That's, you're surviving. You got to just pull your team to the win. It was awesome. And the not ending in puzzles, it didn't even have an effect on it because all of these challenges were so freaking close. Even though, the Nakum tribe, they won 5 of 6, but they were still so close every single time.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess we should really kind of talk about this in the order. We'll break it down each episode, I think. But I don't know. We've never done this. Will and I never did this. So this is going to be interesting to see how we actually go about doing this. But if we talk about all 3 episodes or whatever. But so for this rewatch's purpose, we've had Jim go. We had Morgan break my heart and go. It breaks my heart every time. How could a magician's assistant get 17th place? And we had Brianna go. And those are the 3 people who went. And if you look at these 2 tribes next to each other, that Yasha tribe is so much weaker than the Nakum tribe. Yet without puzzles and anything like that, other than maybe building that shelter thing, Yasha has hung with Nakum, which has been really interesting to watch. And I have a theory on this, but I want to see what you say first.
Well, my theory is that so it's unevenly matched, partly because Nakum just has these big, strong men. But guess what? They're all dead from the dehydration. They're is it Margaret? She is she's got the winners at it because she is just the reason they're alive. I think it's Blake. See, I'm even names I'm still not great with. Blake just collapses for 3 days, pulls it out of nowhere and helps out in the challenges and then just collapses again. That's why it's so evenly matched. Because their muscle, their force is depleted.
Yeah, and I want to talk about this is exactly what I was going to say. So this is perfect. That first challenge is one of the most ridiculous ways to start a season ever. I absolutely love it. But my God, they can never do it again. And you know why. It's because of how depleted this tribe is. But without that first challenge, Yasha is completely outmatched. That first challenge completely leveled the playing field because the big guys from Nakum were carrying most of the stuff, which Blake went down, Judd's puking. Jim gets hurt, who, even though he's older, he's still like a Marine. So you never know. I mean, you saw when Joe played, I know he ate himself to death, but like, come on, Rudy, so like Jim, he's getting through it. He could have been a stronger guy. Brandon's the only one who holds up through this entire thing. And I really do believe that this was beneficial to Yasha to start the game like this, because they were a weaker tribe. And I think each one knows their limitations. Lydia knows her limitations. Brianna knows her limitations, as we clearly see in episode 3. They all know what they can do, and they didn't try to push themselves too hard, even though it was still an 11-mile hike. So they all stayed within themselves, where the other group was like, oh, well, I go to the gym 5 times a week. I'm going to be fine on this 11-mile hike. This is nothing. Not realizing when you get done, there's no protein shake. There's no water. There's no Gatorade. Granted, we're in the the fall of 2005. Were there protein shakes yet? Was that cool? I don't know.
I think they existed. I just don't think that they were hipping with it yet.
Oh, man. Those were the days.
Man, those are the days when you would work out and maybe just eat dinner afterwards instead of having to like snort a shake or whatever.
Right? And like, oh my God. So that's there's so much to talk about here because we're doing 3 episodes. But this was the fall of 2005. The fall of 2005. This was 12 years ago. I was 13. Alexa, what were you?
I mean, I was 12, I guess. I was about to say what we should do is like, we should look at like what dates these aired and like see what was happening at that time. I think that'd be kind of cool. Because I remember when I rewatched Borneo, I texted you and I was like, I was 7. Like, look at their jeans. They didn't fit them very well. Like 2005 doesn't seem that long ago, but it was a decent amount of time ago. And I was actually telling my boss at work, I was like, hey, I'm actually rewatching this season of Survivor. And he was like, oh my gosh, like Stephenie, the pharmaceutical sales rep, like she was on the season. I had such a big crush on her. And I mean, we'll get to Stephenie, but anyways, going back to the 11-mile hike, what was so insane about that is they meet up at some point. Like they start off on 2 different trails, and I'm sure they send them on a similar trail, but they meet halfway, and then like they got to start running to beat the other team. It's awesome. It's so like raw Survivor.
And like my favorite part is like they're like it's an 11-mile hike, and they got like Nakum going through the woods, and at like the bottom it says Nakum leading, and it's like, are they leading? Are we sure of that? Like Survivor, like the editors and producers can easily just throw up leading, trailing, like to make it seem like there's a comeback or something. And it's like they were probably right next to each other the whole time. I know like they couldn't see each other. They were probably so close to each other. You have the cameramen who are walking through, so you know they're probably somewhat leading the way, even though it did look like they were kind of hacking it a little bit. But like we will never see another season of Survivor where on day 1 the castaways don't actually get to their beach. Like we'll never see that again.
No, but it was great. I was a huge fan of it. And like you said, they're all collapsing and like puking, and like you usually don't see that. You always hear people getting sick, but even in like the season, even in episode 2, when they're cutting back like of the recap of episode 1, you were just actively watching these guys puke. And I was watching that and I was like, you don't usually see that. You hear the noises, but just like watching it all come out. It is
2005, Alexa. There's so many things.
What a time to be alive.
There are so many things. I'm going to quote Stephenie. I'm quoting Stephenie, just so everybody knows. I'm quoting Stephenie. It's 2017 now. I understand that. This was 2005.
I have the quote written down, so I'm curious if you actually got it right.
Well, I don't have the whole quote, but I remember she said something along the lines of, this is Stephenie speaking. America's sweetheart says this. They want to get rid of me this early. It doesn't make any sense. What are they, retarded? And I'm like, that's America's sweetheart. Like, they're playing her up like she's the ultimate hero. She comes back on the heroes tribe. She's doing all this. And like, that's her line. If somebody said that now on a season, they'd be on the villains tribe or they would get no more screen time.
And that's what was so funny about it. Like, and that's what I love about Stephenie. Like, this is Stephenie's downfall. Like, oh my gosh, she was such a hero on Palau. And then Guatemala is like when the perception changes. But what's funny is that she totally owns it. She's like, why don't they vote me off? That's retarded. Why?
Yeah.
Like and she, you know what? She was kind of right. Like, that's what I loved about it. She was just like giving it how it was. But I mean, and we talked about this. I don't know why we're talking about this last season, but man, if she had said that now, like she would have got people would hate her.
Yeah, and it's amazing. that at this point, Stephenie is America's sweetheart. Stephenie and Bobby John get announced. And first of all, what like new fans, I know everybody's probably gone back and rewatched these seasons, but I know we have a lot of younger followers who maybe started watching around season 16, 17, 18, whatever, where it was used to a fans versus favorites era. You might have seen Redemption Island and the South Pacific and then, Caramoan, and you're seeing all these seasons where maybe 2 people come back, 3 people come back, 1 person comes back, a whole tribe of people come back. And you got to understand at the time when Stephenie and Bobby John walked out, and I know, Alexa, you didn't even watch this live, but when Stephenie and Bobby John walked out, this was like mind-blowing. Like, people were so shocked that this happened. And I was young. Like I said, I was 13. I don't know if this had been something that had been spoiled. I wasn't on Survivor message boards. I just loved watching it. But
message boards.
Yeah, whatever they were using back then. But it's crazy like that Stephenie and Bobby John come walking out. Bobby John is called the hardest worker that the show's ever seen. Remember, this is like the pre-Aussie era and all of that. So, but like, they're like the hardest worker at camp ever. And it's like, what did he really do in Palau? And then Stephenie comes onto a tribe where people are actually crying because Stephenie's such a fan favorite. People are telling her she's the reason that they're there. It's insane to think about like the impact that Stephenie and Bobby John had. And now Bobby John, as far as I'm concerned, is completely forgotten. He's kind of a dud, to be completely honest. If he's not one of the last 2 left on Palau, then he's not coming back. On Oolong, he's not coming back for another season ever. But that's what got him back, and like he comes back and instantly is falling apart.
And I'm like, again, I didn't watch that live, but what I love about these seasons where they only bring back like 1 or 2 returnees, you have Stephenie coming back and they like welcome her with open arms and everyone's crying, like you said, everyone's so excited. And they're interviewing, everyone has these confessionals, and they're like, oh my gosh, like Stephenie's such an inspiration. Like, we're going to crush the challenges. She's a great leader. This is awesome. And then you cut to Bobby John's tribe, and they're like, he's kind of sucks.
He's strong. Like, that's,
yeah.
They started it off pumped. And then once they started doing the hike, everybody's like, Bobby John sucks.
What does he do? It's kind of like when Coach and Ozzy came. It's like, oh my God, Ozzy. And then, oh, Coach too. Like, great.
Yeah.
So I like that was hilarious. And then he's the first one to collapse on the hike.
Yeah, which I mean, you know what? To be fair, you got to think. I know that there was more time in between seasons at that point, but he probably had only had a couple months in between. Palau for him and Stephenie, it's probably the hardest season like that 2 people have ever had to go through, considering their entire tribe got decimated. They really had to do everything on their own. I mean, James was pretty useless towards the end. I know Angie wasn't doing too much like around camp. I love Angie, but she wasn't doing too much around camp. Ibrahim, I don't really remember too much about. But like they probably had the hardest time. Then they like come back. They didn't have that long really to recover. And then they go back out. And your body, I mean, is probably still, it takes a while to adjust. I remember Tony saying it took him like almost a year to finally get over Cagayan. So like, this is something that probably took a lot of wear and tear on them. Remember, the seasons were a lot harder back then. They were barely – I mean, this season starts with an 11-mile hike. Like –
And what I was, like, unsure about – sorry, I'm, like, tangled up. What I want to see is I want to see Bobby John at the end of Palau. I want a photo there. And then I want a photo of Bobby John at the beginning because I was thinking the same thing that you were thinking. But he had, like, Stephenie looked very, like, Stephenie's super fit, but he looked like he had, like, a good amount of meat on his bones. So I want to know if he was just a naturally very stocky guy, or not stocky, I guess just built, or if he came home and just, like, pigged out and then came back. Because he didn't look like Russell after Samoa on Heroes vs. Villains, like, that was way more back-to-back, but he is significantly thinner than he was when he started on Samoa. Like Malcolm, definitely thinner. Bobby John looked like he had gained back the majority of the weight that he had lost.
Yeah, and I'm just saying I think you can gain back the weight, you just might not necessarily be fit.
Like physically there, yeah.
You know, and what I found so interesting here, and something that is very strange, is like that tribe of like these fit guys, aside from Blake, who I kind of give a pass because he got drilled by that thing. And what I find so interesting about this, I completely lost my train of thought, so I'm going to go to something else. But what I find so interesting about this is you have these guys during the hike, after the hike, Blake gets like punctured with who knows what. I mean, that could have been a poisonous needle. It's not going to kill him, but it could have been something that really drains him. They go back to camp. Bobby John's eyes are rolling back in his head. Medical never comes out.
No.
Where the hell is Medical? Medical is nowhere to be found, and these people are like about to die.
They were tougher back then.
Oh my God. Could you imagine if somebody's eyes, like pretty much Russell Swan, the way he collapsed and everything was very similar to what Bobby John was about to start going through when he's like, huh? And his eyes are rolling back and Margaret's like, hey, Bobby, like hitting him. And it's like, could you imagine nowadays? Like, that's crazy to me that they didn't even try to come out and look at them.
I think they were just like, hey, Margaret, you seem to know what you're doing. Just like take the wheel. We'll come in if anyone dies. Like, it was nuts. Yeah, you mentioned that, and I was like, you're right. Like, they're just letting them all collapse right there. Like, oh, they made it to their camp. They'll be fine.
Yeah, and very interesting, too. The role that Jobs play in this season, it's so refreshing. After now, it's kind of like, here comes Jason, the bounty hunter, cracking his knuckles. Scott, the NBA player. Like, nowadays, like, the jobs don't matter. Michelle is a bartender who wins, and they're trying to be like, she's a bartender, that's why she's won. It's like, no. Like, Jeremy's a firefighter. It's like, that kind of came up a little bit in San Juan del Sur, but really he was just Val's husband. Like, it's so refreshing to watch this and see Margaret and Jim both go right for Blake when Blake goes down. Jim with, his Marine Corps background, and then Margaret with her nurse background. The two of them go right for him and are trying to, like, help him and do everything because that's what they do. And to play it up and have it be said so much, Brandon with his farming and, I forget. So I'll come up with other ones, but it's just so great to see how it all plays into the game. I mean, I guess you can't make Magician's Assistant play too much into the game, but
Yeah, I know we really got nothing from Morgan. I mean, when I obviously knew she was going home, but as she was going home, I realized I was like, we didn't even talk to her, and now we're at this phase of Survivor where we're overanalyzing the edit. Like, oh my God, Sunday didn't get she didn't get a confessional in her boot episode. Like, how bonkers is that? That happened like all the time. Like, I feel like half forgot Morgan was even on the tribe, which was crazy. And like Brianna too, she kind of came out of nowhere. It's just such a very different vibe.
Well, and what's very interesting about this season, I don't even feel like we've talked about much about any of these episodes, but what's so interesting about this season is this is a very old school season. And I don't mean that in terms of like it's old school Survivor. I mean that as in like you have old school people playing this game. Even the younger people like Brian, he's an old school guy who just happens to be young. Brandon, old school guy who happens to be young. You obviously have Lydia. You have Stephenie, who's definitely more old school than new school in this era. Like Bobby John, who wants to be working and doing stuff all the time. Judd, who just can't handle anything. Margaret, Jim. You have all these old school people that I honestly feel like the people who I've forgotten about up to this point. Morgan, Brianna, and Brooke. And Brooke was great in the first episode, and then she just vanishes.
Yeah. Never to be seen again.
Never to be seen again. It's very interesting how this season shapes up going forward. Like, it's a very interesting road that this season takes. And
kind of going off of the Morgan vote out, like on an old school season, you get rid of your weak players. And this was when on the Morgan vote out, it was a Morgan Lydia back and forth. They were like, yeah, well, like Lydia's older. We could obviously let's get rid of her. And was it Blake who?
It was Brian and Gary who fought so hard for Lydia. I love this moment.
He messed up the name. Brian was awesome. He was like, he told her, and she they were such a good team. He told her very smoothly, and she took it very smoothly. She was selling, hey, look how hard I work at camp. I got you 10 minnows. I got you some food. And they were eating minnows and termites. Like, we haven't even talked about that. That was freaking awesome. But and then they brought up a good point. Like, she has carried her weight in challenges. She is not the reason that they lost a single challenge. And we know how far Lydia makes it. A player like Lydia in that era usually can't make it that far. But she pulls it out. And that's a combination of like a bunch, like you said, Brian and Gary coming to her defense, and good on her for making it through episode 2 and episode 3, because if you're watching that live, how does Lydia make it that far?
And that was Lydia's whole thing. And if you actually watch what Lydia does here, she's actually not playing poorly. She's not that much weaker in the challenges than anybody.
Perfectly fine.
Trying. She's actually catching them food. And like Lydia always had this this feeling that like, oh, she's a waste. She's just she's getting dragged to the end. When she got to like Final Four, everybody, I mean, I guess people were sort of fans of her a little bit, but like I know people weren't like big on her. And it's like, I feel like people thought that she was getting dragged all the way. And if you really think about it, she does eventually start to get dragged a little bit. But at this point, she is way more useful than Brianna in Brianna's boot episode. And Morgan, I actually think Morgan had a lot of potential. Morgan falls into that whole trap of like those old school young girls. You're playing a different era of Survivor. On a new school season, somebody like Morgan has a much better chance than on an old school season where you look at somebody like Dolly, who goes out very early in Vanuatu, Mia, who I also think was very young. You lose a lot of these younger girls. I think it was Pearl Island. You lose Nicole early. It was just kind of like a done deal back then. It was like, oh, she's young. She's not providing much. And we kind of respect that the old lady's trying to work a little bit harder. And it's really an interesting dynamic.
I'm surprised that she wasn't very well received, because when I watched Guatemala the first go around, I was like, oh, she's the goofy, like I think she's really cute and I think she's really funny. And now rewatching it, I'm like, wait, no, she's perfectly fine in challenges. She's not the problem right now.
No. Yeah. And then Brian, by the way, me and Will, one of our first podcasts was a one-time players draft. And I took with my first pick in that draft, Brian Corden. And Will was like, you're an idiot. Like, why would you take him with your first pick? Remember, I said, Will likes to say that sometimes. And you know what? I started thinking about it, and I'm like, you might be right. Brian Corden plays now. He is such a good player. He was ahead of his time. There's swaps that come up, all of that stuff. Brian was so ahead of his time, so well-spoken. He was a strategist. Him saving Lydia was strategy. He did not trust Morgan. I know they didn't talk much about that. They try to make it more about strength back in these older seasons, which, you know, is actually kind of nice to watch sometimes. Yeah. Brian keeping Lydia was because he trusted Lydia, and he knew that if he saved her, she would latch on to him. Brian is so ahead of his time. Brian will never play again. I think he's doing very well in politics or something now. He's got a lot going on, but he is one of the people who I really feel like got cheated in the Survivor world. Not that Survivor's fair, and I'm not saying how he goes is unfair, but I would love to see him get another chance. I would have loved to see him get another chance because I think he would have been great.
And you just said it right there. He saved her because if he saves her, then they're a lock. Guess what happened to Millennials versus Gen X? Look who David saved. Look how far it got them. That's a strategy that works. And he was doing that all the way back in season 11. He's amazing. He gives great confessionals. He's so passionate. He's been great. He has been the star of these first 3 episodes.
We could argue Judd and Brandon and Margaret.
Oh, I was going to say Margaret.
Those are my fours.
Margaret is like the reason that her tribe exists.
Well, we're gonna let's actually try to go like to episode 1 here. I know we're scatterbrained because we're excited and we've never done this, but I just want to say too, in case you didn't notice, tweet at us. We don't have a previous video to comment on here, so if you want to comment, tweet at us. We have a new Twitter handle. To get rid of the Phil_and_Will, because I guess Alexa's been here long enough that she deserves some sort of respect. I mean,
yeah, I promise we didn't kill off Will or anything. We're just going for consistency across the board.
Yeah, exactly. So it is Survivor and then Specialist, but it's SPCLSTS. There's no vowels in the Specialist name. Go ahead, Alexa.
But I did check. I was very bored at work today. Sorry to any coworkers who were listening. I work very hard. I was on Twitter just typing in Survivor Specialist. So even if you don't tweet at Survivor SPCLSTS specifically, if you just like type in Survivor Specialist, we will pop up. So you can find us. Yeah.
So find us, tweet at us. We figured we make the change in the off season instead of during the last season because that would just cause havoc.
Can't have that.
We can't have that. So let's talk about, okay, we've talked about this hike a lot. One thing that I wanted to bring up about this hike is character moments. Let's talk about character moments real quick. Because
we love character moments.
Character moments. Yes, the hike is something that the producers had them do, but it's also a challenge. You're bringing out the natural instincts of each character here. Margaret, Blake, Jim, I think it was Brooke on the other tribe is like, come on, guys, we got to speed up. We got to speed up. And then you got Stephenie, who wants to run with all of them, but she's got to go back and get Lydia and get Brianna because they're so slow. You got Gary, who instinctively just takes over. Like, he doesn't want to. He knows he's putting a target on his back, but he has to. Mm-hmm. Like, you just get these moments where people are forced to be themselves. And I love that, and I wish we got more of that again. We don't get that nearly enough anymore. No,
we certainly don't. And that's what was so great about it. That took, how much of that episode did that take up? That took up a huge bit of the episode. We barely even saw them building shelter because they were just trying to survive the aftermath of that hike. And I was okay with it. Like, I thought it was very well paced, that it took up the majority of the episode. And then they canoe over, like, who was it? The losing tribe. They canoe over to Jeff. And Jeff's like, oh, no, hop back in your canoe. Like, you got to keep going. You got another one to go to. It was great.
I love that. I thought that was awesome.
And you bring up a good point when you mentioned Gary not being a natural leader, but not wanting to be a leader. I don't know about you, but every time he spoke, or every time he was referenced, all I could think about was, let's remove Gary and drop Troyzan in there.
Exactly.
It would have been so, like, that would have completely changed everything. Because Gary is very soft-spoken, like, very calm. And not that Troyzan isn't, but Troyzan is, like, fun and exciting and, like, not a professional NFL quarterback. Yeah. Like, the whole time I was just like, man, what a difference there. That I couldn't stop thinking about that.
Yeah, and that's something that's really interesting. And I could see why Troyzan and Gary were lumped together. They were probably around the same age when the season aired, probably like low 40s. I'm not sure exactly how old Gary was, but I think like Troyzan's 54 now, so that would put him probably around 42. So him and Gary are kind of similar. Both have like sporty type jobs. I mean, I know Gary now is a landscaper. Troyzan does like the Miami photo shoot or swimsuit shooting, whatever. But like, I could see why like they would have kind of a similar persona. Even though Troyzan is much more talkative, I feel like, than Gary. Troyzan is also, he still has that laid back. He's not yelling at you. It's very like, wow, yeah, man. I'm like, come on, bro. Like, what are you doing? Don't be dumb. Like, he's not going to be Tony and be in your face. Like, Troyzan and Gary are very similar. Gary's just a lot more. He is like, you can tell like he's played in professional sporting events because he's calm at all times. Nothing really ever rattles him.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things that rattle him, I have a segue into episode. I actually think this might be episode 3. So I feel like we're
kind way to do a segue now. We're on episode 1, Alexa.
I guess I'm talking about Gary. Do I bring up how Danny mentions his profession? Because I thought that was very well done.
Well, I think let's wait until we actually get there because I think that's great too. And I love it. But that's another thing too. Gary is probably the least recognizable out of all of the athletes they've ever had on the show. And you got to remember, this was the first time that there had been a retired professional athlete, at least in one of the big 4 sports, who had been on the show. So for Gary to come out, it's pretty much out of the realm of possibility for him to be like an ex-NFL quarterback. Nobody's thinking that. Now, I know he played for the Cowboys, which obviously puts a little bit more on people's radar because, you know, with America's team and all that. But it's very interesting that, like, she would call him out and he's trying to hide it because he's never seen people play before with a professional athlete. He really didn't know what to do.
And he, honestly, if Danny didn't know, he could have gone a really, really long way because I Googled him as a professional football player and he looks like significantly different, like just different hairstyle, different like hair color. And like a lot of people, you can like kind of tell, like not a professional athlete, but like Lisa on Philippines, for example. Like if you watched her show, you would know that was Lisa. Gary, you kind of can't really tell. And he's tall and skinny. Like he has the quarterback build, I guess. But on the whole, I never would have been in a million years guessed that.
And what's so interesting, like with Gary too, he's so skinny. Like you were saying, like he doesn't have to build. He's so skinny that like you almost feel like, yeah, he's just a landscaper. Like he just kind of does his thing, like whatever. I don't know. It's just it's very interesting, like that Gary does this. He doesn't really know how to do it, but then he ends up taking the leadership role anyway. You have his method during the hike, then you have Jim's method during the hike, which both of them seem to work. They're just both so damn slow. Yeah, and then they finally get to camp. We really talked about episode 1 a lot.
Yeah, we have.
But so then what the immunity challenge? They have to paddle out and then they have to pull the thing. And this is one of those challenges where if they didn't do this 11-mile hike, Nakum wins this so easily. Because pulling those would be so simple for them. It wouldn't be a struggle at all. But they're so beat down that a team that has Gary and Jamie, who's actually pretty talented, he's a pretty strong guy, Rafe, and who was the other one who was pulling? I mean, the people who were pulling for that tribe, nowhere near like the other side. Who was the fourth guy?
Oh my gosh.
Why am I drawing a blank?
Who do you have right now?
Blake, Rafe, Gary.
Judd.
No, not Blake. No. We're on the wrong tribe. It's Rafe, Gary, Jamie. Who's the other guy?
Is Blake?
No.
I mean, Brian?
Brian, that's who it is. Yeah. So those 4 guys are pulling against Blake, Bobby John, Judd, and I don't even know who their 4th one was. It doesn't matter.
Brandon?
It might have been Brandon and then somebody else. I forget who was actually helping with the logs because remember they have
either way, it was very
they have more. You got to remember that tribe has more guys than the other tribe. Their guys are way stronger than the guys in the other tribe. And other than Stephenie, their women are pretty much stronger than that whole tribe. I mean, Amy ends up getting beaten up later. It's the first time Amy's name has been dropped in this podcast, by the way, which is
who's Amy?
Yeah, so they end up winning this challenge, and I think it really is a big to-do with that 11-mile hike. And then they're leaving this challenge, and probably the first real great Judd moment, I feel like this is the first great Judd moment is, well, okay, we had the great Judd moment earlier, but this was the second great one, and we got to mention that first.
Every Judd moment is a great moment.
But this is the second great Judd moment. The second great Judd moment is when Jim is talking about how he popped his bicep, and he's like, I went to pick it up, and I thought everybody else was picking up, but they weren't. And Judd goes, I was lifting that thing like you wouldn't believe. And I'm like, Judd, all he's saying is that you didn't lift at the same time as him. He's not calling you out. Jim was so calm and level throughout the whole thing. He wasn't calling anybody out, and Judd just like instantly like, I'm going to beat the crap out of this little old guy. Like, get out of here.
I'll pop his brother bicep.
Yeah, like, exactly. Like, he's so angry, and it's so real. It's fantastic.
Well, in their tribal council, I don't know if it was the same thing he was referencing, but Jeff asked like a simple question, and Judd just goes on like a 10-minute rant, and Jeff's like, okay.
He's like, what do you want me to tell you? What do you want me to say to you? And he just like ends it with that, and Jeff's like, I just want you to answer the question.
I just wanted you to answer my question.
That's it. And the first great Judd moment, and this, we haven't really talked about Brandon yet. Brandon is great Survivor TV, great, awesome, whatever. Love him as a narrator. That moment when Judd jumps out of the damn canoe and lands in the quicksand with the premature evacuation.
Incredible.
And Judd is just like rolling around in this mud, and it's like, I can't get out. And it's like, you idiot. You are right there. You are 2 feet from the damn beach. Why are you jumping in there?
Then you're going to jump into the mud? Like, why didn't you jump out in the water? Like, I know there are crocodiles there, but like, I just like the thought process is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's Judd though. I feel like that's just Judd. Whatever. They end up going to this tribal. Jim literally gets voted out because of his arm. I mean, I felt bad for Jim because like I feel like this is another guy. I feel like Guatemala. This is the story of Guatemala. I feel like Guatemala is full of people who really could have been great. And these crazy little circumstances hit them. Like Jim gets hit here with this arm injury. And I don't think he would have been their first target. I know he really didn't start struggling till then. I know he was sick before that. But Blake with the other thing was sicker. Bobby John could have easily gone. I mean, Brooke was like, let's get rid of Bobby John now. We don't need him. Let's get rid of him now. And I love that Brooke had that mentality and was willing to voice her opinion on that. I thought that was really, really great. But it doesn't end up working out. Which, you know, it makes sense. Jim had to go here with his arm the way it was. I mean, there's no way you can keep that guy around. No.
And another thing I noticed, Jim goes unanimously. Morgan goes unanimously. And I think, what is her face? Brianna goes unanimously.
They all go unanimously, yeah.
You never see that.
Yeah, no, 100%. They all go unanimously here. And there's a great Rave quote, which I actually put down here. It's in episode 2. He says, we all need to vote somewhat unified so our tribe's not fractured. And it's just so great to see, like, back then, that's how people were playing the game. And you don't see
your
that
tribe to succeed. Like, wow, what a concept.
Russell is the one who came in and turned that on its head. He really is. He sabotaged his own tribe. And because of all the madness of Gabon, Tocantins really didn't have any swaps, and you saw like a tight group stay together. But Russell was the one who came in and changed all that and said, this is about strategy. This is not about surviving. And that changed the game completely. It really did.
No, it absolutely did. That was, instead of, hey, let's get our tribe to win together as a cohesive unit, that was, I'm going to tear down my tribe and then go into the merge with a 48 disadvantage and somehow pull it out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. Because you have everybody loyal, which, you know what? It's a good strategy. But now everybody's kind of tried to emulate it. And that doesn't necessarily work. I don't think it is working. Yeah. Just
at its core, it's hard to make something where this is an individual game. Like, I understand it's all about an individual game. But it can't be 100% individual starting day one. And if your strategy, like, and this isn't an anti-Russell thing, this is just like the way strategy has evolved as a whole. If your strategy is to sabotage the people who are on your team, it's just like not as easy of a path.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, so to be able to say, when you're voting out Morgan, like, I don't want to vote out anyone here, that unit is cohesive. Even though they lost 5 of the next 6 challenges, they were at least together.
No, exactly. And that's, that's kind of like one of the things like that Stephenie is saying. She's like, we're like really getting along and everything. And like, oh man, this is great. And like, somehow they win that first challenge, which is mind blowing that they won it. This is probably the most uneven the tribes have ever been. And yet it is the closest challenges back to back. Every single challenge is crazy. We can go to episode 2 here. And what's the first? The first one is that rope challenge where they're on the net.
Yeah, the upside down Spider-Man one, which is awesome. I really wish they would do that one again.
And you know what the best part about this was? It was, all right, you're going on the upside, you're upside down on the net, you bring back a bag, and that's the end of the challenge. You don't have to do a puzzle, you don't have to throw things, you don't have to do any of that. Just go and get them. And it was an exciting challenge. And for challenges nowadays, they take up about half the episode. Well, these Guatemala challenges are taking up about half the episode. But they feel so much more dense. You feel like you're getting so much more from these characters and from what's going on, as opposed to just, they swam out, somebody fell behind, now they're doing the puzzle. Whoever doesn't get the puzzle done first, it's their fault we lost. Like, back then, they actually gave you a reason to vote people out other than strategy, because you could be like, wow, that person's killing us in challenges. It doesn't really happen anymore. And people might use that as an excuse, but it's always strategy-based now. Whereas, because the challenges are always going to come down to a puzzle. You can be so far behind and still make it up if you have a great puzzle person.
Was it the Final Four in Cagayan where Cass was like still on top of her pole as everyone else is trying to finish this puzzle, and the camera keeps going back to her? I'm like, Cass is going to freaking win this because the camera keeps going to her, and the puzzles are like a great equalizer. Like, why not just do the puzzle as the entire challenge if that's how it's going to be? I get that it's more fun to watch these physical things. So just make them 100% physical. Like you said, that challenge was really, really long, but I was at the edge of my seat watching it.
Yeah. And then you have, I know, like, when Will and I went to the Pop Fest out here in LA, we talked to John Kierhoff for a little bit, who's the challenge guy. And he said they always want these challenges to be visual. But I feel like a puzzle, like the puzzles, yeah, you can have some visual puzzles where it stands up and does all that. But like there's nothing exciting visually about a puzzle that's like put down in front of them, as opposed to doing like a rope thing and running and jumping and doing whatever else they're doing. It's just more exciting, like, than watching, oh, okay, cool, they did all that and it's just going to come down to the puzzle again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we want to watch Survivor, and Survivor is about people doing what you said, like swimming and running and jumping, and they kind of do that, but now they have to be balancing something the whole time. Like, I don't know. These challenges are such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. And then I want to also talk about real quick, just quick side note. I have my little side notes written down here. That intro was so long. The previously on Survivor is so.
Oh my gosh, like 5 minutes.
It was so long. I'm like looking at it now. I'm like, they do like 15 seconds. It was funny because we were talking to Troy Zan. He was like, they got to do the cast intro every time. It reacquaints you with everybody. And they're like, we don't have time for it. We don't have time for it. They definitely have time for it because they cut out 2.5 minutes of previously on Survivor.
Oh my gosh. And what's even funnier now is like back then it was like Jim got hurt. They voted out Jim. They also walked 11 miles. Now it's like Sarah backstabs Sari, who backstabs Andrea, who backstabs Zeke. So in reality, like these ones should be longer. It's the ones in the past that should have been quick. So it's like a complete role reversal.
But I think this also comes down to back then, you got to read Mario Lanza's book if you haven't read Mario Lanza's book, because he talks about wanting to watch the Survivor Australia finale. And he had to trust his VCR to record. He set it to record at a certain time and you had to trust it. People missed episodes back then. Like sometimes you just couldn't help it. You would just miss an episode. There's nothing you could do about it. And I think that's why these were so in-depth, because they wanted you to be able to follow the story even if you missed the premiere. If you missed Jim's boot, they wanted to give you 11-mile hike. Bobby, John, and Stephenie came back. This person got sick. This person got hit with this. This person did this. Blah, blah, blah. And now here's your next episode. They wanted you to know everything that everybody else knew.
And you just reminded me when you mentioned they wanted to bring up Bobby, John, and Steph. Again, I don't know what kind of promotion there was like going into Guatemala when it aired, but if you watch the opening sequence of the premiere, Bobby, John, and Stephenie's faces do not pop up. Mm-hmm. It's not until episode 2 where they pop up. This was a massive secret. And now it's like, you know everything going into it, and it kind of ruins the fun.
It does. And that's one of the things, like people always say they want to know the cast beforehand and all of that. And I remember, it was when we found out that they were going to be evacuated from the beach. They announced that maybe a week before the premiere. And I remember Will got really mad on this podcast saying, why do we have to know everything before it comes out? Like, why do we always have to know the big moments? Why are we doing it where there's going to be this first time ever evacuation? Why do we have to know that a week in advance? Why can't we just watch that on TV? Even like when Jeff does his, tease for next week, he'll be like, oh, another blindsiding. You're sitting there like, okay, well then there's going to be another blindside. Like back then it was a lot of just like, it wasn't easy to know. And like, you were patiently waiting week to week because that's how you lived your life, was week to week, as opposed to now 10 minutes to 10 minutes. And like, it's very crazy.
I know. And it's funny because I think we just live in a time where everyone wants to know everything. And like, I'm going to go super general here. Like when we get closer to these season 35, we're going to be aggressively overanalyzing these players. And unlike last time, for me, that was my first cast assessment. I'm going to have no background on these people. So I'm just going to be basing them off of, I don't know, like an Instagram photo. Like we live in a time where we just overanalyze so much. And I think like we're feeding into that they're feeding into it by giving us this information. But at the same time, we're still consuming that. Like not to go completely off topic here, but it's really nice just thinking like, wow, these people had no idea that Stephenie was coming back, and also Bobby John, but they had no idea. And it sounds like the viewers didn't know either. And they did such a good job of hiding it. And I get that, like I feel the Korong medical evacuation, that was a little bit spoiled. And that I kind of get because there were some like life-threatening situations there. But the evacuation, like we still don't know much info about it. We just know that it happened. But everyone turned out fine. So I don't really know why we needed to know it in advance. I would have loved to have been surprised by that, especially if no one was hurt.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I feel like, it's all about getting people in and getting people to watch the show and everything. And I just wish, like right now you look at like next time on Survivor and they're like sitting there and it's like the game's going to change, I think, at the end of episode 3. And I honestly don't remember if there's a tribe swap next or if it's after the 4th boot. I forget when the tribe swap happens, but it's just funny that like they don't just come out and tell you drop your buffs like immediately. Like now, like you need to know, like they tell you that in the preview, and it's like there's no more excitement to it. It's like, come on. I mean, I still love the show. I'm just saying, from like a general standpoint, it was very fun to watch this. And I remember watching I probably really remember watching the show around Palau. You know, before that, everything was kind of like blurry. I was like 10, 11, 8, whatever. And this was around the time when I really started to remember watching it, like Guatemala, Panama, Cook Islands, like Fiji. Like those were the seasons when I really started to remember. And it was fun to watch those seasons and not know what was going on, not know what was coming out, not know what was like that Bobby, John, and Stephenie are coming back. Like when Fans versus Favorites, I'm sure it was spoiled everywhere, but I didn't know until it was announced right before, because you had to like actively seek it out. Whereas like nowadays, it's kind of like if you go on Yahoo before the season's going to start, it's like, here's every cast member 2 months in advance. And it's like, oh, wow, that was shocking.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm super shocked. Yeah. I mean, Panama is the first season that I watched beginning to end. But I remember kind of passively watching during Guatemala, because I remember watching my family and being like, man, that Judd guy's a jerk. Like, Stephenie's kind of cool. Like, all these
Judd's
things.
the
Like,
man.
no, well, okay, however old Alexa was like, wow, he's kind of a jerk, which he is, but that's what makes him funny.
Okay, so before we get into what you want to talk about, which is obviously the immunity challenge here, Judd talking about how much Blake sucks is so funny, because at this point, Blake can't catch his breath. Blake got hit with this thing. We don't know if medical ever went out, but it's just funny that they never show medical going out to look at Blake. Blake's out there suffering, and Margaret's just sitting there coddling him. You need some water. And Judd talking about it. Judd's a big baby who happened to play on Survivor. That's what he is. A big baby. He's hilarious. I love Judd. And he's sitting there. He's like, oh, my God, I want to be the hero next time. Blake saves all his energy for the challenge because you're sitting over there getting coddled. And what am I doing? And it's just so funny. Like,
and meanwhile, Blake is like passed out dead in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Like Blake's unconscious because he got poisoned by some dart. Like they walked into a pig trap that was set by the Mayans. And like, you know, whenever the Mayans existed, that's what got set. And here's Blake about to die. And Judd's like, you suck, man. Like,
yeah.
So we go to the challenge, Tug of War, in the mud, nice, fun, dirty challenge. And what happens, Alexa?
And Danny, like a freaking genius, while she's tangled up with Brian, she's like, hey, by the way, the guy on your team is a professional football player. And then we don't see that scene. What we see instead is, I think she's on the sidelines and she yells it. She's like, you're acting like a linebacker, but you should be a quarterback. Like,
yeah.
She says something enough to make him like turn. So like she's playing it so well. And it is so smart because he's not on her tribe. Like, Brian calls him out and then he's like, man, I hope someone votes her out. Like, there's nothing they can do. It's so good.
Well,
and she told Brian, like, obviously she didn't know Brian's relationship with anyone. But Brian was like the right person to tell. It was just played out so well.
Don't you wish that they went to a tribal, both tribes together, where they voted out one person and then they went back to their separate ways?
And then Danny, the future winner, instead goes home second.
But so what ended up happening, I think you see Danny whispering to Brian, and I think they probably added this in of Jeff saying this. I don't think that he actually said this out on the island, but he says something along the lines of, Danny and Brian have a little powwow in the center to draw your attention to it. But I think that was probably added in post. And then what she says is, he's just a quarterback. You're a linebacker.
That's it.
And Gary just like looks over at her. And I don't know how much of this was edited for effect, but Gary's like staring at her and staring at her. And like once they went down to the 1-on-1, you knew that Nakum was going to win this one because nobody could outmatch Judd. I mean, Jamie's the strongest guy on Yasha, and he's no match for Judd in a brute physical strength challenge.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and I kind of forget how the rules went. So at the beginning, it was all of them, and then why did it become an individual? Like, why
he said if it's 15 minutes and nobody gets a flag, because they were supposed to, I think, get 3 flags. So it was if it's 15 minutes and no one gets a flag, then we're going to go to individual 1-on-1. And they said anybody can go against anybody, which is a huge mistake by them.
And like you can repeat people. Like Judd went back to back.
No, it was Judd, Blake, Judd, right?
Judd, Blake, Judd, and then Jamie went back to back.
Jamie went back to back. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So in that case, I was just like, well, that kind of like sucks. But what's now looking back on it, when the two tribes are together, it was evenly matched. But then you just put Judd against anyone, and Judd's gonna win. Yeah. That was I guess they shouldn't have made it so that you can repeat people. But
yeah. Whatever. I mean, so then Judd wins this easily for Nakum. One thing I want to draw attention to though earlier, in case, I mean, I don't know people watching this. I'm assuming they've seen the season. Maybe they don't remember it completely. We will talk about Danny as the eventual winner and all of that. Like, that's just going to be stuff that comes up. This is like spoiler ridden. Sorry.
Danny wins.
Yeah, Danny's going to win. But one thing to keep an eye on without spoil, I don't want to spoil so much of the fun in case people forgot it and they haven't watched it. But like a winner, it's hard to talk about a season without talking about who wins it eventually when you know. But one thing to keep an eye out for, that reward challenge was the first time Bobby, John, and Jamie squared off. And Jamie smoked him. So that's the first time they squared off and Jamie smoked him. Just keep that in mind moving forward because, God, that's probably one of the funniest storylines ever.
That's like Colby and Jerry times like 20.
Because it's two pretty just Southern angry guys.
Like they're definitely in love.
I lost you for a second.
But they absolutely.
Yeah,
they're definitely in love, but they also absolutely hate each other. Like it's a weird love-hate thing.
Exactly. And Jamie, I got a quote from Jamie when we talk about episode 3 that is probably one of my top 5 favorite quotes in all of Survivor history.
I think I have it written down too. So
knowing me, you probably have it written down.
I'm pretty sure we're talking about the same quote here. So
now we finally go to this where it's Morgan versus Lydia. And Morgan really hasn't been bad in the challenges. She was pretty good in the spiderweb one. She's a magician's assistant. I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but she's a magician's assistant. So she's very useful in everyday life. She's very useful in challenges. She's the coolest person that's ever been on the show because she's a magician's assistant. And it comes down to her versus Lydia. And this is right after, like you said, Lydia had caught the minnows. And what ends up happening is Gary and Brian fight like crazy for Lydia and somehow get this to be an 8-1 unanimous vote.
Yeah, it's amazing. And before we go into that, so is it because she's a magician's assistant or is there something I missed in the first 2 episodes, like personality-wise?
Oh, Morgan? No, Morgan should have been asked back for fans versus favorites because she's a magician's assistant.
And heroes versus villains and game changers.
As an obvious hero. And yeah.
And a game changer.
Anybody who also watches Dalton Ross, where he's got Sally Longsocks, that's me. We'll talk about Sally Longsocks when we start doing Panama. But Morgan, the magician's assistant, I totally forgot. I knew there was a magician's assistant on the show at some point. I totally forgot what it was. I'm so happy like that it came up, and now I can talk about it on the podcast. But I'm so mad that she was the second boot. I really forget the pre-merge of this season or pre-swap of this season. I really forget it.
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad we're rewatching this because this has been really fun to watch, and we had like nothing good and kind of nothing overall to say about Guatemala when we were doing our season rankings. So I'm really glad we did this, and I'm really excited for you to change your opinion on Panama. But anyways, they flipped that. They flipped that to a 8-1 unanimous vote, like you said, and everyone seemed to kind of go along with it. Like they were throwing Stephenie out at first, and then I don't know when Stephenie was just taken off the chopping block and it turned into Morgan versus Lydia. But you know what? You got to give Lydia a little bit of credit too because she was really selling herself. And they were starving. They were eating freaking ants for protein. Like she was able to get them fish. And no, minnows are not like real fish if we're going to get if we're going to really classify here. But she got them like real live protein. And Morgan, from what we were shown, felt extremely comfortable, and she was a little bit blindsided there.
She was totally blindsided, and she even says, "I was absolutely shocked by this." And Jeff doesn't even call it a blindside, but he does say, like, it's crazy that you guys are all about unity, and it seems like you're all united. Yet the person who went tonight had no idea it was coming, and that was crazy. Like these guys were playing a very social game back then. It wasn't about big moves; it was about being really social and everything. And we see that moving forward. You know, when you start looking at the final 7, final 6, final 5 of this season, it really does play out where the people who are better at the social game are the ones who make it deep in this game. Even Rafe, who's considered a great strategic player, it's his social game that gets him through at the beginning of this because he couldn't get up the damn ladder in that reward challenge, and it's like embarrassing. And they're still like not even bringing his name up, probably because the rest of his tribe is weak, but still – like, you know, it's just crazy.
Yeah, and that's what's so funny. And Stephenie is like, she's consistently referencing the Oolong tribe. And it's just so funny hearing them be like, we're one big happy family. And Stephenie's like, they're all retarded. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Like,
brutal.
It's really funny. And I guess even though they are losing, like, they do have that positivity, and you see the winning tribe consistently be negative, and it's a very different dynamic from what you're used to.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. The winning tribes always beat down. The losing tribe's doing great. The only other thing that I think we need to talk about episode 2, which we kind of already touched on, is when Brian does call out Gary, and then Amy is over there like, we got to get her out. Like, she's trying to stir stuff up over here. We need to get her out. This could have really backfired on Danny because we hadn't really seen cross tribe like that, where people were really trying to mess with the other tribe yet. And this could have backfired on her moving forward with a swap or with something where they could be like, we got to get rid of Danny because she's trying to screw everybody over. What ends up working out for her, a little bit of a spoiler here, is that her and Gary actually end up working together, which is kind of what ends up working for her, is that Gary actually needs her once it comes out, and she needs somebody, and they're down, whatever. Amy, though, calling this out, it's great that she's sitting there saying, we got to get rid of her, and then knowing what ends up happening with Danny, what ends up happening with Amy and all of this. It's really, really interesting to see. Like, it's so much fun to do that with, like, the foreshadowing, everything, and the little things that are thrown in throughout. Yeah,
and then you bring up a really good point with her and Gary end up working together. I think she probably knew that she was the only person on the island who would have known that he was a professional NFL player. So she might have made that shot in the dark knowing that would put a huge target on her back, but at the same time, maybe thinking, okay, Gary, like, I know this about you. No one else can guarantee that. So you're kind of stuck with me, or else I'll really blow your cover.
Yeah.
And so, and also Blake, or I keep mixing up Blake and Brian's name. Brian could have gone and said it wasn't Danny who said that, but he made it very clear that it was Danny who told him. So there were a lot of things that worked out very well for her in that situation.
No, very well for her. Very well for her. And, it pays off her a little bit here. So then we go to episode 3, right? Here we go. It starts off right away with Brianna and Lydia, just complete awkwardness. Pretty much as soon as this episode starts, when you're looking at it from the new school editing and everything, Brianna's gone as soon as this episode starts. She's instantly portrayed as being awkward and like an outcast. And we've already seen people having Lydia pledge allegiance to them. Yeah. You don't need Brianna. And the way that this starts off, there's another scene later in the episode where they're all sitting around talking about going in the water or something. And she's like, they're all laughing. I think it's Amy and Steph and somebody else. They're all laughing and stuff. And Brianna's just kind of like sitting there staring. And I'm like, this girl might be like a sociopath a little bit. Like, this freaks me out. But this beginning is the third great Judd moment. Where
we need to keep a tally.
The damn howler monkeys wake them up. And
those things sound like trucks.
Oh my God, they're awful. They're awful. I was listening to it for 15 seconds watching the show, and I wanted to bash my head into the wall.
Yeah.
And you have Sydney saying, people pay for this. Like, this is great. I love this. And Judd's like, we got the damn zookeeper over here. And like, he's so mad that this is happening.
I'm going to get a jar and I'm going to name it Great Judd Moments. And every time he has a great Judd moment, I'm going to like throw $1 in there or something and see how many dollars I have at the end of the season.
And I've heard Judd was a huge pain in the ass for production, which I could totally see. But Judd is a character. Judd and Rafe. Rafe will never play. I found out Rafe's like a writer out in Hollywood and all that.
Yeah.
But Judd needs to play. Should have played Survivor again by now. He should have. Could have been a villain. Could have been on Fans versus Favorites. This was a larger than life character who definitely could have played Survivor again.
Then that's the thing. Judd is probably a pain in production's butt. I bet the people who lived with him were ready to jump into the water and get eaten by crocodiles. Yeah. But man, as a viewer, Judd is awesome. He is such good TV. But God, I would never want to live with him.
Well, and that's what's great about Judd. And then, I just saw Giovanni Oriana saying the live chat here. Judd and Shane are both great TV that people don't want to live with, but they're great TV in the sense that they're still harmless. They're not bad people. This isn't great TV like nowadays, what we see as great TV, where people are literally just pushing people down, bullying, whatever the hell you want to call it. This is great TV in an entertainment standpoint. Yeah. You're thoroughly entertained because this is how people are, not because you're watching the downfall of people. I
would watch Judd and Shane over Nayanka and Colton.
And Brandon.
Like, exactly. 10 times out of 10. Because like you said, they're harmless. They're like, they're mean, but they're funny. That's like pushing people with prosthetic legs down.
and like yelling at them about their fake leg.
Yeah. God, that season is so stupid. But yeah, they're great. I mean, Jed he is larger than life, like you said.
Yeah. And then so we get to this first challenge. We have it's a blindfold challenge, and they got to build this like little tent thing, archaeological tent. You have Gary calling and Brooke calling. I was surprised Brooke was calling for Nakum. With all these big, strong guys, you would think one of them would be the yeller. Like, you know, somebody would want to just stand up there and scream the whole time. So I was very surprised that it was Brooke who was calling. I loved watching Danny get hit in the head consistently and just be like, guys, just tell me when it's coming. And then the next time they pick it up and still drill her in the head anyway. But what I don't understand about this challenge is Yasha is winning. And they get to the tent building part. Could they not figure out that the whole middle was actually all one length? Because they were like building it as if the middle was higher than everything else. And
I don't think they figured it out. Yeah, I think it just wasn't connecting because they were even trying to put the tarp on it when the middle was too long. So yeah, I don't know.
No, the middle was the right height, but they had the very middle one was the right length, and they had the two side ones as being like way shorter. And I was like, what's going on with these people?
Yeah, I have no idea because clearly the people next to them were figuring it out.
Yeah.
I don't know. But that was another really cool one because, yeah, it ended with a puzzle. But it was like a tent building puzzle. Like, it was useful. Like, they could maybe take that information back to their camp and make a tent out of it. Exactly, which is really cool because it's like they could do something here. Like this is something that fits with the theme of the show, the theme of the season. It's the Mayan Empire. They're excavating the ruins. This is something that has to do with it. It doesn't happen anymore. No, it doesn't. And that's what I loved about the season 2. And I think that was like the one positive thing that I mentioned during season rankings. It's like Guatemala is such a different vibe in terms of location than what we're used to. Like, they're literally living in like the Mayan Empire. Like, that is so cool. That's like China levels of culture, and everything that they're doing is relevant to it. And even at the first tribal council, Jeff is like, by the way, like, look at where this tribal council is, like giving this whole backstory. It's amazing. And another thing I noticed, I think I need to watch another episode. I think where they sit at tribal council and where they vote is like at least like a 30-foot height difference. Like, I think there's a massive staircase there. Yeah, it looks like it's way different. And then it even comes into effect, and I don't want to get too far ahead here, but I guess there's really not too much to talk about in episode 3 because it was so obvious Brianna was going. But it comes into effect in that immunity challenge, where the immunity challenge is based around an old Mayan game where they would literally sacrifice people if they lost, which I think is ridiculous. And people who complain now and they don't get a trophy when they lose, I'm not calling it a participation trophy. Okay, I'm not doing that. But people who complain when they don't get like anything when they lose, they want stuff handed to them. And here's people getting like, okay, your team lost. Let's sacrifice the person who blew it. That's the last thing they're ever gonna do. Yeah, man, the good old days. Yeah. So we do that. God, that was something. But before that, when they lose the reward, and they go back, and Nakum is trying to they win like the tarp or whatever, and everybody's like, the guys are trying to come up with a way, and then Margaret's like, well, let's do it like this, and then they cut to Bobby John going, this is supposed to be fun. And I'm like. She wants to put the tarp up. What is fun about a tarp? Are you gonna play the parachute game? Everybody sits underneath it. Like, what are you talking about? And also, like, what is this? Is this in reference to Margaret putting up the tarp? Is this in reference to Your Day? Is this in reference to Survivor? Because you've played Survivor before and you know how it works. Like, what part is supposed to be fun? Yeah, like, I don't understand this. And then Judd gets mad at her. Like, the Nakum guys. Margaret. The Nakum guys are just children. They're just children. They just march around pouting. And I feel bad for Margaret because she got stuck on that tribe. She starts on Yasha. Margaret does much better in this game, I think, because the poor girl does not get any respect from the Nakum men who she nurtured through the first half of this game. And they're like marching around. It's like Blake and Judd are like, can you believe she's being like this? And Blake's like, oh, I can't believe her. Or maybe it is Bobby John. I don't even know. But it's just like, what is she doing? She wants to put the damn tarp up. Like, she's the reason you guys are still alive. And it's so sad because we know how her story ends. But if she's on any other season with any other tribe, like, she's a leader. She's well respected. Like, she has no chance of going home. And it's so funny that she's on this tribe of children And she's the reason that they're like breathing, and they're like, God, she's so annoying. Why aren't we having fun with her?
All she had to do is hide the water; they'd all be dead.
And
like, what's a shame with somebody like Margaret, and this is the same. I don't know. Forget it. Spoiler alert. Turn it off if you want to skip ahead like 20 or 30 seconds here. But the shame with Margaret and Brian is this was pre-merge people being brought back. No pre-merge people had ever been brought back. Bobby John was the first, but that was a different circumstance. He didn't hit the merge, but it was because he was one of the last 2 people there. Everybody on All Stars had made the merge. Fans versus favorites, everybody made the merge. Heroes versus villains, everybody had made the merge. So up to this point, everybody had hit the merge, and you have so many great characters go out pre-merge in Guatemala. So many. And like it's a shame because by the time that they started bringing back pre-merge people for like second chances, and even you could even make the argument when Russell Swan comes back in Philippines with Game Changers, it was too late for somebody like Margaret. Jeff Varner and Kimmy Kappenberg come back because they were on the most watched season of Survivor. Margaret can't come back because who's going to remember her from Guatemala? People don't remember Guatemala anyway.
Was there anyone from Guatemala on the second chance ballot?
No. Guatemala has never gotten any respect.
Which is ridiculous. And now it's, like you said, it's too late.
Yeah. Because the only one who could come back, Danny could come back, obviously, but she wants to do
I think Danny will come back. Like, she's always been on in the talks, but she's the winner.
And then Rafe. But Rafe has such a career going now. Like, he runs his own show. He doesn't need to come back and be on Survivor. Judd, it seems like production's never going to work with. Gary's never going to come back. You know, Lydia, Jamie, Bobby John had already played twice, so that doesn't count. But, like, Brian, Margaret, none of these people are coming back. It just seems like Guatemala might be a lost cause.
Which is really sad because I'm discovering that I really like it.
Yeah. Which I'll tell you, I know why I had this season so low. I think I ended up putting it too low, and I'm going to end up moving this up in my rankings. But I do know why I had it low without really remembering the season as much as I'm about to. All right, so after they lose to Stephenie, everybody's eating the termites. And Stephenie saying, I'm not going to be your friend if you eat those, was so funny. I just wanted to bring that up. It was so funny.
Like, I know. Like, what are they supposed to do? Like, fine, Stephenie, don't be my friend. I'm getting some protein. Like, yeah. Like, were you friends beforehand? It was so funny. And that's the thing. She's not like a villain necessarily, but she'll just like she's kind of like a very, very toned down version of Judge. She just like finds a way to be slightly less mean about it and like less boisterous about it. But yeah, the thing she says is like, you'd be like, oh. But I think because she's America's sweetheart, everyone's like, you're right, Stephenie, I shouldn't eat the termites.
Exactly. Which is so funny. I mean, Rafe and Gary did it anyway. They don't care. And she's like, no, it's not that. I mean, I don't know, man. It's something. All right, so then they go to this challenge, and I guess Brianna didn't understand that being sacrificed means being, like, butchered and killed and all that stuff, like back in the Mayan times, because she was just down to stand there by the pole and be done and whatever. Like, they had no chance coming to this one either. Once again, they're just outmatched in like every aspect. And my favorite moment from this challenge is Stephenie explaining to Lydia and Brianna what a pick is. And then she goes, do you know what a pick is after explaining it? And Lydia looks at her and goes, no. And I was like, she just told you what it was.
And then you like they very, very briefly cut to the women on the other team. And I think Danny, like, because she's like a huge sports fan, just looks and it's just like, what? Yeah.
Like, and like Brooke definitely knows. Like, you can tell Stephenie was put on the wrong tribe.
Oh my gosh, it's hilarious. Lydia, that's what's so great about Lydia. She's like, nah, I don't. I mean, it was funny because Stephenie just told me, like, no, this is a pick. Like, just knock him. Lydia's like, what?
Yeah, yeah. And then Brianna goes and just stands there. At least Lydia's running around trying. There's that really great moment of Lydia getting the ball and then sprinting down the mat, and Jeff's like, Lydia, stop. Just come back.
Can't do it. She was like, she tried. And hey, she made it far.
That's what did it for her. She tried. That's why she made it past Brianna. She made relationships with people. Brianna made no relationships with people. Brianna goes home. And in the quote of all quotes, Jamie says, I like him pretty and crazy, and she's neither. And I'm sitting here going, wow, Jamie, you are the man, I guess. Like, my God. And the way he says it, he's so creepy. Like,
I like him pretty and I like him crazy. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Such a creepy voice too.
He's just got that look in his eyes.
Yeah,
but,
I heard him say that and I was like, ooh.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
funny.
Jamie's a great character.
Yeah.
God, Jamie's ridiculous. Jamie's somebody who doesn't need to come back and play again, but in his one season, he is a great character. He's the first one to really call out, how am I going to win if Stephenie's here? How am I going to pull this off if Stephenie's here? He's a smart guy. He's just one of those guys. Once you lose the food, you become a lot creepier and a lot less likable as it goes on. And my God, he just gets weirder and weirder as it goes.
There were a lot of good quotes in the season, and we're only 3 episodes in.
Yep. And once again, Brianna goes home in a unanimous boot. She's pretty fine with it, it seemed like. She's like, oh, this is fun, but whatever. I'm gone.
This is a good week.
See, I mean, Amy pops her ankle in that challenge and isn't even one of the top 2 choices to go home.
It's crazy. It's really insane.
I mean, she's have to have her ankle falling off if she's going to go home. Love Amy.
Yeah.
Freaking love Amy.
Amy's so funny.
Amy's amazing.
She's so funny. What were she and Lydia were talking about something, I think, in the second episode about, like how long they've gone without washing their clothes. I don't know what the conversation
her clothes. She was like, this thing's going to rot. Like, she's like holding it up. It's like see-through. She's like, is anybody else's brown?
Stuff. Oh my gosh. It was that was like our introduction to Amy too. And I was like, she's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Yeah. All right, let's jump over to comments. We'll do Ice X. Guatemala has there been a more arduous season start? 11-mile trek, injuries, dehydration, sleeping in the jungle, and then the premature evacuation.
Oh, always arduous, those premature evacuations.
My God. That is for a season that I've ranked so lowly, I know people always ask, where does this rank in terms of premieres? This is probably a top 5 premiere ever. I really believe that this premiere is just what Survivor is all about, and I just love it.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Here, you want to do some comments? You got this. You can go back and forth.
All right, so Gamer Girl, did Judd not know that Blake was sick when he called Blake lazy? We talked about this, but even if he knew that Blake was sick, he probably still would have called him lazy.
Well, I think he knew he was sick, and I just think he didn't care. No, I think Blake was milking it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Gamer Girl also says, "What's the long previously on segments?" We talked about that. They're insane. I think I gave a pretty good recap of why they'd be like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Gamer Girl again. Do you think if Margaret wasn't there, that some of the Coon boys would have gotten medevaced? Blake probably would have.
I think Blake would have, but I'm so curious.
Well, like you said, we've never even seen medical, so.
Yeah, medevac. The only medevac at this point was Scoopin'. Janu quit. And at this point, Janu had quit, Sue had quit, Jenna Maraska had quit, and Austin had quit. And then Mike Scoopin was still the only medevac. I really don't know what medical was doing back then. I know they wanted to keep this as if it was as much an adventure show. I know they tried not to show medical back then. The drama for them now is medical coming to camp and being like, oh my God, what's he doing? The drama for them back then was giving the illusion that medical's never going to come for these people.
And like you said, if the only person who had medevaced is Scoopin', who had 3rd-degree burns over his entire arm, like that's your bar for someone getting kicked out, for someone being taken out of the game. So, like a little bit of dehydration, like that's not a 3rd-degree burn on your arm.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying right, but that was at the bar. Yeah, it's interesting.
Before we keep doing comments, live chat, Middle Earth Lamb just said the swimming on the river scene. We completely forgot about that. When they actually go out into the crocodile water.
Would you have done that? I don't know.
Probably if I would not. I would have sat on there and just dumped water on myself like everybody else was doing.
And Phil and I lived in Miami for 4 years, and in that kind of climate, you assume if there is a drop of water anywhere, there is an alligator in it.
Yeah,
I would love to know how much production was like involved in there, because we later learned that they figure out the ability to have a swimming pool, but we'll get to that. But I was watching that and I was just like, these people are idiots. Like, what are they doing?
Brandon's like, I've never felt more alive. And it's like, yeah, you almost felt dead. And like,
because you're about to die.
Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I've run on golf courses and stuff in Miami in like the early morning, and there's like crocodile or alligators, whatever. Alligators just like walking around on the golf course, and you're kind of like, it's interesting. Like they're like hanging out in like the water.
Yeah, then just sitting there. And I was in South Carolina 2 weekends ago, and we were biking around, and we were like, oh, let's find some gators. And they just like swim freely. and then they'll look at you, and then they'll sink into the water, and then all of a sudden you can't see them, and you're just like, I'm gonna freaking die if I don't run out of here. Like, those things are not to be messed with. And here these people are just like frolicking around, like all these crocodiles, everything's fine. That was crazy. I can't believe we didn't mention that.
Nothing was fine.
It's like the picture of the dog in the room and everything is burning around him.
Yeah.
It's just like, everything's fine.
Yep. Gamer Girl, how did Brandon not get sick during the 11-mile journey? Brandon's the man. That's really all I have to say about that. Like, Brandon, more physically fit. He's also the youngest. He's only 22 at the time of this, which I was really surprised at. He looks older than that, but he's only 22 at the time of this season. So I think that he's just in better shape than most of them. I also think that he's much more within himself. I think he's used to the harder work. I just think he was more prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. ISEX, what a spectacular piece of Tribal Council. For sure. Tribal Council, you're usually not paying attention to what's around you. But when Jeff goes out of his way to explain it, and also when you're just watching them walk up those stairs, I feel like, screw this. I don't want to vote. Like, to have to go all the way up there. It was really great. It's a really nice touch. Yeah.
Giovanni Oriana, is the Trek the most reckless thing in Survivor, considering Judd, Blake, Bobby, John, Brandon, and Jim are all on the brink of death?
Most reckless. I don't know. Jumping into crocodiles might actually be more reckless.
Yeah, it could be.
I think because that is like you can stop during the trek. If you're getting eaten by a crocodile, there's nothing.
You're not stopping? Is that what you're saying to us?
I'm just saying. I don't know.
Gamer Girl. Sorry, I think you froze, so I'm going to keep reading because you did freeze. Gamer Girl, why did medical check on Amy? Yasha doesn't have a Margaret on their tribe.
Because they were tougher back then. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe they did and we just didn't see it. Like I said, I know that the drama back then was these people are on their own and they tried not to have like medical or camera or anything like that ever be a part of it. But I don't know.
Yeah. Giovanni Oriana, Stephenie is very entitled this season. Agree or disagree?
She gets there.
That's the thing, right? So right now we're only 3 episodes in. And here's the thing. Stephenie may be entitled, but everything she said is right so far. Mm-hmm. Like, she's very correct. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's just not conveying it in a way that is America's sweetheart.
No, exactly. She never should have been America's sweetheart. Like, the only reason she was America's sweetheart was because of Survivor, because she was the last one remaining on Survivor Palau.
Yeah, because the rest of her tribe sucked.
I mean, I think I've told this before on this, but I'm going to tell it again. I used to work for a pool company in New Jersey. My boss used to bartend with Stephenie, and he helped Stephenie make her video to get on Survivor Palau, which I love talking about. And he said when she was on Palau, he was really surprised how she came across. He said he watched Guatemala, and he didn't want to say anything bad about Stephenie because I think he actually really did like Stephenie. But he did say Guatemala Stephenie is a little more accurate. Being from that area, that's the area my mom grew up in. That's the area my aunt grew up in. That's the area so much of my family and everything, and their friends who I know, they're a lot more like Guatemala Stephenie than Palau Stephenie. That's for sure.
Hey, you know what? She's kicking butt in the challenges. Like, she's being a leader. She may be a bit of a jerk, but right now, like, I think she's funny right now.
No, she's funny. She's eating up too much screen time. I will say that. With Bobby John, he doesn't eat up as much screen time as Stephenie, which is nice. She eats up a lot of screen time.
Well, the difference is Stephenie, there's a little more going on with Stephenie.
Yeah, but I still hate that she takes up so much screen time.
Oh, you're up.
Am I up? Tyler Bellmeyer, do you think that we will see 2 returning players again soon? I really hope not. I hope they're done with it.
So I think it's in reference to
this type. Yeah, this type of season.
I don't think they will, because this season, like, obviously Guatemala, like, I don't know if it was well received in the moment, but clearly, like, people aren't talking about it anymore. And then we have a handful of seasons like this that are horrendously received, and they're considered the dark ages. So I think production won't touch this again.
Yeah, and especially since Philippines was the last time they did it, and Russell Swan did terribly, and Mike Skupin now has over his head what he has over his head, I think they're done.
Yeah, absolutely. Giovanni Orion again. Rafe is the best player in Guatemala, and it's not even close. How do we feel about that?
I pretty much agree. I think the only one who could challenge him is Brian, but we didn't get to see enough of Brian.
Yeah, I really like him. I don't know if it's not even close, but I think he like gets really good.
Yeah, he does. And some would argue that Danny is the best player in Survivor Guatemala.
Yeah, excellent point.
Larry Miller, fun fact, I really hate Lydia. She does nothing. She's the boring Sandra. Boo, Lydia's adorable. She's great. She's
cute. She's a hard worker. She's comedic relief. And you know what? She has yet to do poorly in a challenge. I'm not going to say she's bad in challenges until I see them lose a challenge because of her. Because they haven't. They've not lost a challenge because of her. She has done her job.
That's a good point.
Giovanni Oriana. Judd reminds me of Peter Griffin from Family Guy. He's just a little meaner.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Teeny bit. Peter Griffin means well.
Yeah, I was saying if you guys could travel back in time and be a part of any season, which one would you choose? Oof, man, that's exciting.
Fun.
Alexa, can you travel back in time and pick one?
I'm just trying to decide, do I want to be on a season that I can win or a season that I would just have a lot of fun on? Because if we're going to be perfectly honest here, at 12:32 a.m. on June 15th, 2017, I don't think I could win Survivor. I really don't know if I could. So I'm feeling like I want to be on a season that I just have a lot of fun with. And instantaneously I go to Panama, but I realized they all hated each other. So I don't it was fun for me to watch, but I think they all hated each other.
That would not be fun. I would go
Amazon.
Amazon?
I think Amazon would be fun.
I think I would go grab Morgan, get her to abracadabra me. Right into
this is a family-friendly podcast.
Oh, now you're going to turn that into that. Get her to abracadabra me with the wand into
oh my gosh, and then what?
I would probably actually say Africa. I feel like Africa would be dope. I know that they struggle with the
dysentery
water.
And die.
You know what though? Like how often are you going to go to Africa and like live in that environment? I think that would just be so amazing. Like you can go live by a river, you can go live on a beach. Like, you know, these beach ones, they happen so often that they all start to blend together. China would be cool, I guess, but like Australia could be cool. But like you could go to Australia and like probably see a lot of that stuff. In Africa, like I just feel like that'd be so cool to live in because whoever gets to live that way.
Mm-hmm. Where specifically in Africa were they?
They were in Kenya.
Okay, that would make sense.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. Yeah, we're looking at this two different ways. Like, yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Like, when am I ever going to go to Africa? Like, let's do it then. And I'm thinking Amazon because I think that's a fun cast, and they had a good time. Like, it was a really amazing season, but they also had a lot of fun with it. And I don't know. I just think that'd be. I think Africa and Amazon. Those two good seasons. That was a great question. I'm like still thinking about this.
By the way, one thing I do want to bring up too, Guatemala is the season where Survivor got in trouble. And that's why season 12 started off with old men, old women, young men, young women. And then season 13 and 14 were so racially diverse. Guatemala was the first season, or one of the main seasons where Survivor came under a lot of fire at the time for not being diverse at all. And if you think about this cast, every single person on this season, aside from Lydia, is white.
Caucasian, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. I didn't notice that until you brought it up, but now it feels so glaringly obvious, especially now because a lot of the seasons are significantly more diverse.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that was something that they really tried to address moving forward. So 2005 was starting to get it a little bit, you know? 2005 was starting to get to the 2017 arc here of more diverse casts and all of that. But Guatemala was one of the casts where it was very, very apparent. And I know that it became like, that's why you see Suri, Bruce, Bob Dog. I'm not saying that that's the only reason. Obviously, they're all great characters, but this was like something that CBS really tried to take initiative on.
Just fun fact.
Giving a little update.
No, very good fun fact.
Gamer Girl says, episode 1 is better than episode 2, which is better than episode 3, but Guatemala is a solid season so far. I totally agree with that.
If we're going to start following that pattern, maybe we know why we put Guatemala so low.
Exactly, but episode 1 is so good that I don't blame it.
Yeah. Icex, isn't it odd to see Jeff so subdued compared to later seasons? Even then, he didn't cut anybody slack, though. Jeff better not ever cut anyone slack.
I know, right? No, he was, it is weird to see him, like, still trying to find his footing. I really don't think he finds his footing until, like, it's like around fans versus favorites. Like that's when he starts to feel it. Like at this point, we're not at cocky Jeff. I would say heroes versus villains actually is when we start getting cocky. Like I'm the man. You guys shut up. This is my damn show. You guys are just living in it. Like I feel like that's when it starts to happen.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
We have Ryan Jakes Taylor. Was Bobby John foreshadowing no returners when he said not a lot of people get to play again?
Bobby John, he really knew what was happening.
Yeah, maybe that's what the editors knew. Maybe they put that in because they knew that 23 seasons later they would still not have a returning player, and 24 seasons and 25 seasons because it looks like 35 and 36 aren't returning player seasons.
Yeah. Wub. Oh, I finally get to say Wub. Is it just me, or was editing an old Survivor a lot more unpredictable than it has been lately, especially in Game Changers? If you've listened to our podcast in the past 3 months, you know how we feel about the editing in Game Changers.
Yeah, well, they even go on to say, just to finish that comment, and could it be because Educ and Internet wasn't so popular back then like it is now?
I'm going to say yes, because I was like, right when I kind of joined this podcast, my mom was listening and she was like, Alexa, you just like, you don't watch the show the same way that you used to, and not in a good or bad way, but analyzing these confessionals and just analyzing like, oh my gosh, like Adam said this when he found the idol, like he's got to win now. It changes how you watch the game. And I'm going to say not in as good of a way, because I don't really like, it's not fun predicting the winner. And what's so crazy about Guatemala is you can't really predict Danny as a winner, because the way she formatted her game was so different from how any other winner did it. And that's why I'm excited to watch this season, because a lot of people don't really know why Danny won until way later.
I mean, I just think that like all the winners became very apparent, have been very apparent recently. Karamoa, you knew Cochran was going to win. In 27, once you knew Tyson was going to win once the merge hit. 28, you were still saying there's no way it's going to be Tony, but if you really go back and watch that, there's no way it's not Tony. Natalie Anderson was so apparent after Josh and Jeremy were gone. Mike was so apparent because you didn't get to know anybody else that was there. Jeremy was so apparent. And I remember watching the season 32 finale with Will. And that was probably some of the most fun. It was Will, me, and my roommate. And that was probably some of the most fun I've ever had watching Survivor. Because that was so that was like, oh my God, she actually just won this season, meaning Michelle. Because you started to get into that rhythm of like, oh my God, we know who's going to win again. And the Michelle win is very comparable to the Danny Boatwright, I feel like. Because it's just, maybe we can make I'll probably end up making parallels to that all season long as we watch Danny go on. But if you watch Danny early on here, she's not owning anything. She's not controlling this game. She's just saying things and making relationships with people that are what end up working her through to the end. She's observant. She's using her knowledge of Gary to get her further in the game. Michelle was always using her relationships and knowledge of other people to get further in the game. And this was a very similar win where you were like, wow, they just beat the person who everybody really thought was going. I don't know if people by the end of this ever thought that Stephenie was going to win, but they beat the person who you really were like, oh my God, like they got most of the screen time all season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You bring up a good point. We might be doing a lot of Danny and Michelle comparisons, because I think they're very comparable.
And you know that makes Phil excited, so that's
well.
Good.
I'm a huge Danny fan, and I know you love Michelle. I love both of them. So you like Michelle?
Do I? How long has that been going on for? Isaacs. Love the blindfold challenges, pure slapstick. Plus, there's always the chance of a season-ending injury. Danny was probably concussed after this. Maybe that's why nobody knew what her game was, because she just had a concussion and couldn't tell anybody.
We didn't even talk about that. Every cut, it's like Danny getting whacked in the face by that thing. It's so funny.
Oh, I brought it up. You were texting.
I wasn't texting. I don't text during this. You're awful. Okay, well that's all the Twitter comments.
No, we got one more. Isaac says Gabon is in Africa, which it is, but I think that Africa, the original, would be so much more fun. Would be so much more fun to play. Gabon is like the most stressful season ever because the cast is so all over the place. There's so many tribe swaps. I would not want to be on Gabon.
Africa would also be stressful because you're going to get dysentery, and also you're going to get yelled at by Mark Burnett because you didn't make a good enough lion trap.
Yeah, but you know what? That's Mark Burnett's fault for putting me next to a damn lion. So,
yeah.
Hey.
They could have planned that one a little bit better.
Yeah. So that's actually, now we're done with Twitter comments. That was pretty fun. I'm surprised we talked as long as we did. We went on a lot of tangents at the beginning. My God.
I know. Well, that's what we're good at.
Yeah, that was fun, though.
That was fun. I'm really looking forward to continuing along the season. This was a good idea.
Yeah, I hope everybody else enjoyed it. Comment on this video and let us know what you're thinking. If you enjoyed it, if you're enjoying watching Guatemala, if your view on Guatemala changes, if we break it down well enough, if you were alive in a much more coherent state than Alexa and I in 2005, tell us what you were thinking. I was in 8th grade, so I was probably going through my own shit. But you know,
Phil and I were peaking in 2005.
Yeah, if you wanna go with that. Yeah, so if you got like some input into what was kind of like the vibe here, I just know that Stephenie saying retarded was still okay. So hey,
Jamie's saying I'm crazy and pretty, and she's neither. I'm gonna make this quote jar, or a quote jar, or a Judd moment jar. I can't decide.
Well, I think we should just do quotes. I mean, so far Guatemala's had a lot of great quotes here. Just a different time, but this was fun. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope everybody keeps watching and doing this. And we're going to watch 4, 5, and 6 this week. So if you want to keep up with us, we're doing this fast, but it's that we can do 2 seasons in the off season. Otherwise, we would only been able to do 1. Got to be 3 episodes a week. So we're going to do 4, 5, and 6 this week. And I think that hits the merge. Does that hit the merge, or is that like the week before the merge? Forget what it is.
It's the week before the merge. Anyways, we'll find out, because this is kind of new. I mean, obviously I know what happens, but day by day I don't really know. So it's kind of nice rewatching the season, kind of remembering I'm curious who is going to go home. But yeah, we're going to watch. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say what's nice about this is now we'll never forget Guatemala again, because we're going to talk about it to death.
Yeah, and now I'm going to be after this, I'm going to be done, because we've overanalyzed it too much.
Exactly, but that's fine.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's what we like to do. We like to go on tangents and overanalyze TV shows.
Everything. Yeah. So Alexa, close it out, Alexa. Do your
thing. So we're gonna watch episodes 4, 5, and 6, like Phil said, this week. We're going to return next Wednesday. Does that work for you, Phil? I know
next Wednesday works. It's the week after. I got to do Thursday.
Okay, we're gonna. Good to know. So we'll be back next Wednesday. We'll let you know the exact time as it gets closer. But in the meantime, leave a comment on this video as you're watching 4, 5, 6. Leave us some questions. Tweet at us at our new Twitter handle, Survivor Specialist. The word specialist has no vowels in it. You'll be able to find us. Give us a listen on iTunes. We hit over 900 Twitter followers the other day, which is super exciting. So let's get it up to 1,000. Yeah, give us a listen on iTunes. Tell your friends. And yeah, we'll be in touch with what time on Wednesday of next week we'll be podcasting.
Yep. And yeah, we'll see you then.